What if the very thing your brain tells you is love is actually a psychological glitch, not a flaw in your character, not bad luck? A glitch, a deeply wired cognitive trap that has led millions of intelligent, self-aware people to commit their lives to someone fundamentally wrong for them. And here's the part that will unsettle you. The stronger the feeling, the more convincing the trap. Today we're going to pull that trap apart, because understanding it is the first step to escaping it. Firstly, there is the familiarity trap. Psychologists have a term called the mere exposure effect. It was first documented by researcher Robert Zajonc in 1968, and what it essentially says is this: the more familiar something feels, the more we like it. That sounds harmless enough, but here's where it gets dangerous. Your brain doesn't just apply familiarity to songs you've heard before or foods you grew up eating. It applies it to people, specifically to emotional patterns. If you grew up in a household where love felt anxious, where affection was unpredictable, where you had to earn attention, your nervous system learned to associate that feeling with love. So when you meet someone who triggers that same anxious, uncertain, slightly destabilizing feeling, your brain lights up. It says, this is familiar. This feels like home. But familiar isn't the same as healthy. And feels like home can sometimes mean feels like the wound I grew up with. Psychologist Harville Hendrix calls this the Imago, the unconscious blueprint we carry of our earliest caregivers, their strengths, their wounds, their emotional patterns. And we spend our adult lives searching for someone who matches that blueprint, not because it's good for us, but because our nervous system recognizes it. The trap isn't that you chose badly. The trap is that your brain was running a program you didn't even know existed. Next, there is limerence versus love. In 1979, psychologist Dorothy Tennov introduced a concept called limerence. And it might be the most important word you've never heard. Limerence is that overwhelming, all-consuming state of early romantic obsession. The constant thinking about someone, the euphoria when they text back, the devastation when they don't, the feeling that this person is the one, that you've never felt this way before, that nothing else matters. It feels like love. It is not love. Limerence is a neurochemical event. Your brain is flooded with dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin drops, the same cocktail involved in obsessive-compulsive disorder. Research from University College London found that people in early romantic love showed brain activity almost identical to OCD patients. And here's the critical piece. Limerence is most intense when the outcome is uncertain. Remember the intermittent reinforcement we talked about with sports fans? The same mechanism. The unpredictability is what keeps the dopamine flowing, which means the person who is inconsistent with you, who sometimes pulls you close and sometimes pulls away, will trigger a far more intense limerent response than someone who is steady, kind, and reliably present. Your brain will tell you the inconsistent person is more exciting, more passionate, more right. What your brain won't tell you is that it's confusing anxiety for attraction. Another trap is the sunk cost of the self. Now let's say you've been with someone for 2, 3, 5 years. Things aren't right. You know it somewhere deep down, but you stay. This is the sunk cost fallacy. And it doesn't just apply to bad investments or unfinished Netflix series. It is one of the most powerful forces keeping people in the wrong relationships. The sunk cost fallacy is the psychological tendency to continue investing in something. Time, money, emotion, simply because you've already invested so much. The logic goes, I've given so much to this. If I leave now, all of that was for nothing. But here's what behavioral economists like Daniel Kahneman have shown us. Past investment is irrelevant to future outcomes. The time you've already spent cannot be recovered whether you stay or go. The only rational question is, what does the future look like from here? And yet our brains are not rational. We are loss-averse creatures. Kahneman's research shows we feel the pain of a loss roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. So leaving feels like losing everything you've built, even if staying means losing everything you could become. There's also an identity layer here. After years with someone, you don't just lose the relationship when you leave. You lose a version of yourself, the self that was their partner. And for people who already struggle with a sense of identity, who already feel a little different, a little outside the mainstream, that loss can feel existential. So you stay. Not because it's right, because leaving requires grieving not just a person, but a self. There's one more trap worth naming, and it's the one that plays out most visibly, most painfully, in long-term relationships. The avoidant anxious dance. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and later expanded by researchers like Mary Ainsworth, identifies distinct attachment styles formed in early childhood. Two of the most common and most combustible together are anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. The anxiously attached person craves closeness. They read into silences. They need reassurance. They feel most alive in the intensity of connection and most terrified of abandonment. The avoidantly attached person protects themselves through distance. They value independence. They feel suffocated by too much closeness. They pull away when things get too intense. Now here's the trap. These two types are magnetically drawn to each other. The anxious person pursues. The avoidant retreats. The anxious person pursues harder. The avoidant retreats further. And in that push and pull, both people feel something that registers as passion. The anxious person mistakes the relief of occasional closeness for love. The avoidant mistakes the comfort of controlled distance for compatibility. Neither is getting what they actually need, but the dynamic is so familiar, so neurologically activating, that it can last decades. So what do you do with all of this? The first step is simply awareness. You cannot escape a trap you cannot see. Understanding that your nervous system has been running an unconscious program, one written in childhood, reinforced by experience, is not a reason to feel broken, it's a reason to feel curious. The second step is learning to distinguish between activation and attraction. When you feel that intense, destabilizing pull towards someone, ask yourself, is this excitement or is this anxiety wearing excitement's clothes? Healthy love, real love, tends to feel quieter than limerence. It feels like safety, like being known, like breathing out. It doesn't mean it's boring. It means your nervous system isn't in a constant state of threat. The third step is sitting with the discomfort of the unfamiliar. If your template for love has always been anxious and uncertain, then calm and consistent will feel wrong at first. Not because it is wrong, but because your brain hasn't learned to recognize it yet. That recognition is a skill, and like all skills, it can be built. The psychological trap that makes people marry the wrong person isn't stupidity. It isn't weakness. It's the brain doing exactly what it was designed to do. Seeking the familiar, avoiding loss, chasing the dopamine hit of uncertainty. But you are not just your brain's programming. Understanding these patterns, really understanding them, is one of the most quietly radical things you can do for your life. Subscribe if you want more of this, and I'll see you in the next one.